Today I thought I'd do a video on school, specifically being neurodivergent and trying to navigate school. Now, if you're watching this, you're probably neurodiverse and you can probably relate to a lot of these experiences. When I say that school was traumatic, I mean in a very real sense that it was traumatic. That is not an exaggeration. School was probably the most traumatic period of my life for many reasons. I think my first memory with school, I remember being about 3, 4 years old, realizing that I had no choice. I had no say in whether or not I go to school or not. Did anyone see that? But yeah, I had no say whether or not I could even go to school. I had no choice. Once I accepted that no amount of crying, no amount of any attempt of protest wasn't going to work, once I accepted that I essentially had what felt like a prison sentence, I fell into like a long-term burnout. This affected a lot of things. Firstly, it affected my performance in school. I was top of the class for the first year of primary school, and I remember there was a key moment where I stopped trying. I basically was so disheartened by the school system, by the lack of passion, and it was so clear to me at such a young age that all that mattered was the school looked good. And I basically, to summarize, I saw through the whole school system and the fact that it was essentially just practice. We were being conditioned to wear a uniform and to conform, and I found it terrifying. This is where my fear and phobia of authority started, which I still have. A lot of my behaviors in school were completely misunderstood. As a undiagnosed child, a lot of my behaviors were seen as difficulties, disobedience, and non-complicitness. And no matter how much I was told otherwise, I couldn't do what I was told properly. If I didn't agree with something or didn't see the logic behind it, I couldn't do it. I couldn't go along with things. This is a common issue with a lot of us autistic people, is our PDA response, our panic around injustice gets triggered so often in a school setting, especially when you're undiagnosed. This heightened sense of justice seeking and this persistent drive for fairness got me in a lot of trouble and put me in positions of extreme distress. When I was about 6 years old, there was a science test, and one of the questions for the science test was about space, and one of my special interests at the time was planets. One of the questions was asking what the hottest planet in the solar system was. And at the time of the test, I think a lot of people would have assumed that Mercury was the hottest planet. But because I was obsessed with planets at the time, I knew that Venus had a special type of atmosphere that essentially traps heat. So I knew Venus was hotter than Mercury. When I got the test back and I had a cross next to my answer, I told the teacher and I said, Venus is the hottest planet, this is why. And she didn't care. But she took a massive disliking to me after that. And that truth-seeking drive, it caused an argument and I got in trouble. But I just didn't understand why she didn't care about the truth. This unfairness broke me. School is where I learned to mask. And I got quite good at figuring out the social hierarchy, and I essentially just ignored it. Because of the way my autism manifests and I identify as non-binary, my interests were with people quite a lot of the time. I was very interested in people and psychology. I would fixate on people, especially when I was younger. I think it's also important to mention, because I was non-binary going through school, a lot of my masking was also gender role masking. I would essentially mask to be a boy. I was masking for my autism and my gender identity as well. As soon as I got into school, I realized that I couldn't wear my Snow White dress any longer. Essentially, for my own safety, I had to perform as a boy. But of course, children are intelligent socially. Neurotypical children can sniff out when you're different. And a lot of people really didn't like the fact that there was something off about me. And because I wasn't diagnosed with anything, I was supposed to be normal. This gave people a free pass to bully me, essentially, because I wasn't disabled. I didn't have anything physically wrong with me. I wasn't wearing like a helmet or, something that signals to people that it's wrong to target me. So I was essentially a free pass to pick on. So although a lot of the children I went to school with were mean, it was more so the segregation, less so much than severe bullying. It was more so like I was outcast. The bullying happened from the teachers. I was bullied more by teachers than students. And I've spoken to other autistic people who were undiagnosed, and this seems to be a common theme. Teachers really want you to conform, basically. If you've got people in your class who challenge the educational structure, ask questions that are seen as disobedient, teachers hate this. I was bullied way worse by teachers than any student. And again, this caused some lasting trauma and some lasting phobias around authority figures. This crept into adult life. I have serious phobias of being told what to do, being in a group setting and having to learn. It wasn't until I was finished with school I really started to be able to learn and teach myself. I just coasted through just in this chronic state of depression, essentially, for the whole of my school years from age 4 to 16. I was basically in survival mode. I was in prolonged burnout, half switched on for the whole duration of school. When I got into high school, I started to make friends. I had a few very good friends in high school who I really liked. I had a friend who I bonded with over skateboarding, and we had our own inside jokes. He might even be watching this right now, who knows. But a lot of people, I was always treated like the butt of a joke. Even the way people would say my name, it was very much like people just kind of saw me as a joke, and I didn't know why. I didn't know why people kind of saw me as this kind of meme. And of course I leaned into this and I became a bit of a class clown character. I would be funny in order to basically so people would leave me alone. School was extremely traumatic. As a neurodiverse person, you are so susceptible to being traumatized. This is why it's so important to have a diagnosis. It could save your life, and it could save permanent damage from being subject to a world that isn't for you, an environment that isn't for you. The neurotypical world is not for us. And it's not up to us to change. You can trust autistic people when they tell you that they have tried to conform, they have tried to work a 9 to 5. There's nothing that I'd want more than just to snap my fingers and be able to live like a normal adult and do things without having meltdowns. But of course, it's not that simple. We need reasonable adjustments. We can't just fake it until we make it. This issue that society has around taking people with neurodiversity seriously, it causes so much damage. I'm still recovering from the years and years of trauma from people around me, people who were supposed to be close to me who just didn't take it seriously. Being punished for being autistic is disgusting. So to summarize, school was seriously traumatic. And this bled over into workplace as well. So a lot of us with autism can't really do what we're told safely. and the burnout will catch up with us no matter what. I think since my diagnosis, I can now look back at this childhood experience I had and be a lot less harsh on myself. I can forgive myself for not being able to act properly and for being autistic. I can essentially pinpoint my behaviors that were deemed as inappropriate, and I can forgive myself. I forgive myself for letting my grades slip because I was so depressed and anxious that I couldn't concentrate. I forgive myself for answering back. I can forgive myself essentially for being a neurodiverse child in a neurotypical world. Self-acceptance from my diagnosis has probably saved my life, to be honest. So if you're watching this and you're late diagnosed or you went through a traumatic childhood, your trauma was very real and it wasn't your fault at all. You didn't deserve any of it, and everything you went through is so valid. I hope you can forgive yourself like I'm trying to forgive myself and have some compassion for ourselves. If you look back at what happened to you and imagine it's a different child, just take yourself out of it and just imagine someone had your life, a different person with a similar name. And just think about that child, that scared, bullied, neglected child who went through this traumatic misunderstanding and just felt like an alien. You soon start to feel that compassion for yourself, and it helps. The damage is done, but what we can do now is apply context of why we were the way we were. Let some of that grief and trauma out. Let it slowly evaporate. So yeah, we'll leave it there. School wasn't a good time. Yeah, please share your experiences with school in the comments. Maybe you enjoyed school, or maybe if you were diagnosed as a child, let me know how it was different. It'll be really interesting to see how it might have been different if I was diagnosed earlier. I have read some comments on my last post and I will make some videos on those topics. I'll probably do another Q&A pretty soon, maybe a 5,000 subscriber Q&A. So I will gather some questions for that. Thanks for watching and goodbye.